lot of details. Yeah, got it. There are a lot of details and a lot of things that you have to pay attention at it. So it's really important that you can see it all afterwards. We're going to have a short time in the end of the presentation also for questions. But in case we can't answer all of your questions, there is Jacki is in the Discord channel. You can always talk to her afterwards next week. It's not a problem. Also a reminder that there is a second part of this workshop, like of this series of workshops, which is on October 12th about how to pitch and showcase your game to publishers and investors. So here is to create the pitch deck, then is the pitch. And then on October 21st, we're going to have the pitch event for students and people that want to practice their pitch and get feedback on their projects. And then on November 1st, we're going to be announcing next week, but just to let you know here, on November 1st, we're going to have the pitch event for professionals. So then it's the real thing, directly pitching with publishers and investors and hopefully getting deals. So without further ado, I will leave you in the very capable hands of Jacki Vause from Dimoso. And Jacki, I will be quiet in the background, but if anything, I'm here. I will disappear, but I'm here. So go ahead.
So hello everybody, my name's Jacki Vause, as you now know. I have a company called Dimoso, which is a PR and marketing company, and the reason that I'm here presenting this how to pitch or to create a pitch deck presentation is because I have worked with publishers, I have worked with investors, I have personally secured investment for projects, I've bought companies, sold companies, been around the block a few times in the games industry. So I started my career years and years ago working in tech publishing. And then I worked at a software company where I identified games and different software products to bring over to the UK where I'm based. I'm going to try to speak very slowly, by the way, because I do appreciate that we're talking in some of your second languages. So back to my sort of potted history, and then I set up my own my first public relations company, and I did that in 1996. So that's showing my age. So I've run a few companies since then and gleaned a lot. So hopefully you will get something out of this presentation. And as Patty said, if you I'm very much one of the big supporters of Game On. So if there's anything that you want to ask me after this event, then that's absolutely fine. Please do contact me on Discord. And then if we need to go into something that's a little bit more complex, then I'm happy to do that offline. So let's just press on. So what we're talking about here is not getting your game ready for the publisher or for the investor. That's a whole different set of things that you need to think about. And usually publishers or investors, publishers particularly, will have ways they want you to submit games or the state they want the game to be in, whether that be a MVP, a minimum viable product, or whether that be a full working with all the bells and whistles in it game, which I'm finding less and less is the case. I think more and more publishers are looking more and more even at concepts and at things that they can test in terms of setting out a playable ad or a trailer, etc., etc. So, but that's a whole other thing to do. What we're talking about today is how to create a compelling pitch deck and what publishers and investors are looking for. Now, the two are very different creatures. Publishers and publishers are looking at publishing games, And investors usually are looking at investing in people and companies. But the reason we've brought it together is sometimes those two things cross over. So sometimes the publishers are almost like an investor, in the sense that they will look at a game and they will look at bringing on that whole studio and buying that studio. And we've seen a lot of that in the last couple of years, how publishers are becoming like investors. Investors are getting closer to being like publishers as well, because a lot of the games investors now are usually ex games developer, ex publishers. So there are a lot of funds that are set up that are specifically tailored towards games and mobile games. And here again, we're talking about mobile games, but again, people will look across PC, across console, across any platform. But here we're going to just look at the deck and how you present yourself in that deck. Right. So I've done my introduction. And do feel free, by the way, to just pop some messages in the chat. I know Patty will keep an eye on things as we're going along, and she'll interject if I need to stop, or pipe up yourselves. Don't feel shy to ask me to repeat something or ask me any further questions on a point. So the first thing we're going to look at is what do publishers want? And then we're going to identify if that's any really different to what investors want. And there are a few sort of fine nuances. Then we're going to look at the sort of preparation that you need to do before you're going into your pitch deck. We're going to look at research. We're going to talk about your story. And then we're going to give you a little pitch presentation checklist. We're going to talk you through a whole structure that you can easily follow. And then we'll come up with a few ideas and closing thoughts and some hints and tips. So let's press on into the first one. So I've talked about me and Dimoso. My objective here is to give you, by the end of this session, the infrastructure that you need to create a halfway decent deck. And what I'm going to say to you is halfway decent, because when you've created your deck, you're going to want, and you should, go and show that to all sorts of different people, and just check that what you're putting in your deck resonates with them and they understand the points you're trying to get across. And I do that to this day with presentations about the things that I know the very best. And the reason that's important, and you can bring in your mom, your dad, your old teacher, whoever you like, to help you with this. And the reason I do that is that sometimes you can get a little bit too close to what you're presenting, and you can make assumptions that people will understand certain things. Never make an assumption. Put more in to explain than less to start with, but do get the feedback and then make sure that you edit down, because what we're looking at here is a group of people who receive lots and lots of decks. They receive lots and lots of approaches, and they know what they want to hear. And luckily, I know what they want to hear too. So we're going to go through that. So, what do publishers want? Well, they want to make money. And if you really think about it in the most basic of terms, the games industry is bigger than the TV industry. It's bigger than Netflix. It's bigger than Hollywood. It's a multi-billion-pound industry. And it's, and it's a tough industry. Millions of games on the app stores. And really what publishers have done, or the successful publishers have done, is they have proven their way of making money. They're money-making machines. So they're not going to invest in something that is a passion project without any sort of business reasons behind it. They are going to look for things that they can use to use their own existing network, contacts and their own existing expertise. And you'll find when you look at different types of publishers that quite a lot of them have gone down one area. They've gone down one route, whether that be community card games, or whether that be hyper casual puzzle games, or whether that be match 3 games. You will start to see, when you start to look at different publishers, that quite a lot of them, not all of them, but quite a lot of them have found their genre, they've found their operating niche, and the really large ones are churning out maybe 30, 40 games a quarter and putting them out there on the app stores, seeing how they monetize, seeing how they work, and literally chopping them if they don't work for them. So they're quite ruthless with what they look at. So I'm talking about the very large publishers who are literally like money-making machines. And when they're doing their work on their, their analytics and everything else, it's like running a trading desk when they're doing their UA campaigns and everything else. They've got everything down to a finely tuned art. It's a data science, what publishers do nowadays. So don't let this put you off, but you have to bear in mind that their mindset is, yeah, of course, they want great games and they want really good looking games. They want to have chart toppers, but they want to have, the money. So we have to really think about, when we're presenting, to put ourselves in their shoes and give them the information they want to know in order to fulfill that objective of theirs. They also want good relationships. And what I've observed recently is that we've seen a lot of publishers buy a lot of different studios, small studios. Some of those studios get it. Some of those studios understand what a publisher wants. And that makes for a really great relationship. And my first piece of advice to you, write it down in block capitals, is never assume, always ask a publisher what they want from a relationship with you. So important, because if they feel that they've got profitable, easy relationships, that puts you right to the top of the queue when it comes to considering taking on your game. And that is so important when you consider that they're running their own organization. They need you to be part of their team. They need you to be thinking the way that they are thinking. So there's nothing wrong with asking the question, what are you looking for from a developer relationship? And they will be able to go 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 things to make that relationship good. And ultimately, it all comes back to making money. So let's ask that question about investors. What do investors want? Now, investors are usually not investing in one game. They're investing in the organization, in the people, and in the technology in the game. And they're going to be looking at slightly different things, but the same principles do apply when it comes to having that good relationship with the investors. At the end of the day, sorry to sound harsh, but it's true, investors are going to be looking at the bottom line, and that is the return on their investment. And that often goes beyond just one game. That can go into the people that they're looking at, maybe they're looking at the whole team, and they're looking at the team that can do it themselves, that don't need too much guidance. And when you're looking at different types of investors, and as I said, some publishers can be investors, some of you might want to look at smart money. And when I say smart money, that might be, very game specific investors. And when I'm talking about investors here, there are all sorts of different types of investors as well. You can be talking about angel investors. You can be talking about friends and family. You can be talking about big funds. You can be talking about corporate investors. Corporate investors come from different companies like Warner Brothers or Lego. So there are all sorts of different investors. But the things that they will look at, even if you're a friend or a family member, you will still ideally want to get a return on your investment. Also, those investors will be looking at how quickly you can grow the business and whether that's scalable, whether that can scale globally, whether you have a line of games in your sites that you want to bring to market, whether you have a specific kind of expertise. And they're going to be asking you to ask yourself some tough questions. They want you to understand the risks. They want you to be able to tell them what those risks are and be honest about it, and tell them how their money is going to help you mitigate those risks, how their money is going to help you grow and scale. And really, if you're going to a professional investor or a fund, they're going to want to see the investment that you have made with your time and your money, the investments that you've brought in already, your previous family and friends funding, your seed funding. And they're going to want to know what sort of milestones you've already achieved. Bottom line is they're going to want to see you've got skin in the game. And they're going to want to take a chunk of your company for their money. They're taking a big risk, holding on to equity because you don't want to give away your company, but you expect somebody to put some money in, isn't going to work. You're going to have to find out how those investors work. And most investors have very tried and tested methods of how they invest. And they do differ, and they differ from investor to investor. So just think about the type of investor that you're looking at. But always these key points will come back into their minds when they're looking at putting an investment in. So there are slight differences between what a publisher will look at and what an investor will look at. But the bottom line is both are investing in you. So when you're producing your materials for them, which is what we're here to talk about, all of this is vitally important, that it's part of your mindset in trying to answer the questions that they will have. So let's get into a little bit more of the meat of this. Your game for your publisher, and then why your game for the publisher, your company for the investors, and why you. And it isn't as simple as it seems, because the bottom line is that one size is not going to fit every need. And what I always advise people when they're creating decks, yeah, it's great to have a general deck that you could generally hand out. But when you're, and the structure that I've created here for you will help you create a general deck. But the most important thing is when you go back and you look at publishers or investors, they're just like people. Everybody's different. And publishers and investors are all very different. Even though they might be looking for the same thing, they might be looking to achieve the same thing. What works for them is going to be different. And that's where the hard work comes in for you. Because it's just not a case of creating a great looking deck and putting it in front of them. It's much more the case of capturing hearts and minds and working on a person-to-person basis. And the best way of doing that is doing your research on the publisher or the investor, but also making sure that you know what your story is, your origin story, as Joachim from Elite Game Developers calls it. It's so important that you understand the essence of what you're saying, that you know the main points of why you've done this game. What's so great about it? Why is it different? Why is it not different? Are you following a very tried and tested mechanic with a new twist? What has led you to this? Your story is very, very important for a number of reasons. What I always say to everybody in business is people don't remember what you say. People won't remember your deck after you've presented it to them, because they'll be off reading another deck. What they do remember, and what they will remember, is how you make them feel. That is so, so important. And the start of that for you with this deck is knowing your story and knowing what you want to say about yourself. And it can be the most off the wall thing. I remember hearing a journalist tell me a story about a guy who'd been writing him emails all the time, wanting him to review his game. And it was a pretty average, normal game. And the journalist was, finally the guy ground him down. And the journalist said, "Where are you anyway? Where are you based?" And he said, "I'm actually in an igloo. I am doing this from an igloo on my data, and I'm coding my game in an igloo." Well, the journalist was just like, "Oh my God, this is a brilliant story." It's off the wall, I know. But that journalist remembered that and talked about that at many presentations as he went, into his own life. So that made an impact. And that's really a lot of what this is all about. If you get under somebody's skin and you make them feel a certain way about you, it's like that X factor, then you're again pushing yourself up the queue. Now, I've said what's their story, and that's also very important when you're creating this relationship, because getting a publishing deal or getting an investment deal is very much the same as getting married. It's a contractual relationship born out of promise and hope, and everything looks rosy when you're, skipping hand in hand into the world. But to understand and to create that relationship, you need to understand what their story is, what motivates them. And the internet is a wonderful thing. It provides all the resources that we need to do our research. And frankly, if I was an investor or a publisher and somebody came to me with a deck and they hadn't found out my history, my story, not only of my company, but also of me, then I'd be a bit, okay, I'll take a look at it. It's my job. But if somebody had gone to the effort of going, "Jacki, I know that you've developed a puzzle game before, and I know that you did it with this person before, and I saw this interview that you did, and I read this article that you wrote," then I'd be like, okay, these guys are taking this really seriously. They're interested in what I want. They've done their research. I'm going to look at this deck with really keen eyes. That's very important. So I haven't even talked yet to you. And where are we? We're now nearly half an hour into this presentation. And I haven't even talked about the physical deck preparation, because your mental, your attitudinal preparation for doing a job like this is more important than anything. Putting it on paper is the last job. Knowing why you're good, knowing why your game is good, knowing why your company is good, knowing your backstory, feeling passionate about what you bring, feeling positive that this game that you've developed could be the next big thing for them. For a publisher, it could bring them a chart topper. For an investor, it could bring them long-term return on investment. You could become one of their superstar developers. all in the attitude and all in how you make them feel. So I really, really want to drum that home to you, because it's a super competitive marketplace. And we are looking at the combination of creativity on your part, blood, sweat, and tears on your part, your heart and soul sometimes. And it's how you bring that to them. Don't let yourselves down by not doing the background work. Have faith as well in yourself. So some things that you would want to ask of a publisher or do your research about with a publisher would be looking at where they're based, and have they, if you're looking at a publisher that's based in Belarus, for example, have they worked with companies like your own in Sweden or in Norway? Have they published or press released what they are looking for? Quite a lot of publishers do interviews with great magazines and media like gamesindustry.biz, like pocketgamer.biz, Pocket Gamer. All these titles or these industry newspapers are really a great source of information. Have you been on their LinkedIn, for example? They often put posts of blogs and things like that. The website is usually a great source of information. If you look at Tilting Point, or if you look at Lion Studios, they've all got lots of information that they publish about themselves and their investments. Do they publish games like yours? That's an interesting one, because sometimes a mid-core publisher might look at a hyper casual game because they might be thinking of moving that way, or it might go the other way. But you have to do your research, and oftentimes you'll find publishers have a certain niche and they know it and they can exploit it and they can make money out of it, and they'd like to stick with that. What does success look like to them? Are they regularly topping the charts? Are they looking to expand as an organization? You'll find a lot of this from your research. What are they especially interested in? And the other really good thing to do is connect with other people who have had their games published by them. The wonderful thing about this games industry is that there's a lot of people like me and like Patty who have been around the block and who are happy to come and just help and give you their expertise. That's a really unique thing about this games industry, is that everybody generally wants to help each other. While it is competitive, while it is dog eat dog, you'll find that a lot of people are happy to share what's worked for them. They're also happy to share what hasn't. What you have to do is lose your embarrassment gene. Do not be embarrassed to ask. Do not be embarrassed to ask what you might think of as silly questions. Say right from the start, if you're opening a conversation, say, I know this might sound stupid, but I want to know all the information. Nobody is going to tell you off or judge you badly for asking questions. And questions are going to get you there. Questions are going to get you the information you need. And by the time you've done all your research, you will actually have pretty well informed and educated questions, you would hope. So this is a nice little checklist for you to use to frame some of your research and some of the things you want to ask. Let's look at the investors. And this, again, I keep reinforcing this. This is before you even put pen to paper or hands to keyboards. With the investors, you want to look at what sort of investments they like to do, what sort of investments they've done. Have they published or press released what they're looking for? Have they invested in similar games and companies? What does success look like to them? And what are they especially interested in? Connect with those companies. And this is the big black arrow here. Have I got all the right data to hand? My retention metrics, my milestones and benchmarks. And we'll go a bit more into that when we get into the deck. But you've got to bear in mind that if you're starting to ask questions of investors, they would start asking you questions back as well. So it's a very similar checklist to the publisher checklist. But if you go back further in the deck to what I originally presented, remember what they're looking for. They're looking for a return. They're looking for good relationships. So cross-ref your questions with what you know they're looking for, and then what you've researched out that they're looking for. Publishers, investors, anybody wants to be captivated by your story. Your story is your greatest asset. It's your original thinking. So please do not be shy. Lose your embarrassment gene. Tell your story. And you know what? A lot of people say to me, well, this isn't that interesting. I'm just a normal person. I don't have anything that interesting to say. I've just developed this game. And you would be but that's like saying, I'm a nothing person. I'm a boring person. Every game, everybody has a story, has a backstory. Find yours and and bring it out to the fore. And this is where I come back to your attitude and to your confidence and how you feel about yourself. You will have spent years, sometimes months, days, weeks, weekends, times when you should have gone on holiday, developing this game. You've put passion into that. You've got to let that passion come out. And again, it's not what you do, it's the way that you do it. And that's so important as well. And do you remember I just said it's how you make people feel? Well, that's a lot down to how you do what you do. Now, if I was sitting here presenting to you, just going and reading off the deck, and you'd be bored senseless. You wouldn't want to be waiting to hear what I've got to say next. I'm excited because I think this is genuinely a great subject. And it's genuinely where I've seen people try and fail and try and succeed. So do everything that you do with commitment and with passion and with enthusiasm. So when you're starting to think about your deck, what's it going to look like? How's it going to read? Is the person you're presenting the deck to going to want to share it with anybody? Are they going to want to print it out? Are they just going to want to flick through it and get to the meat? Because we all know that we've seen presentations and everyone goes, yeah. What's the ask? Where's the money bit? So bear all of that in mind when you're actually starting to prepare your beautiful deck. And then you've got to think about how it's going to grab attention. Now, today I was thinking of throwing in some visual effects, some fly-ins, some zooming ins. All those things can go wrong in a presentation. So think about how much time you have to present. And will those visuals take up time, and will they not print well, or will they, you have to make some decisions. And that old adage, kiss, seal it with a kiss, keep it simple, stupid. It's the most important thing. Keep everything as simple as you can, but as enticing and as attractive as you can. Why did I choose my color scheme today? Well, apart from the fact I love the color orange, it's actually quite a gentle color on the eye. It's not something that's very challenging. It's not making a statement. All of this deck has been designed for you to be able to listen to what I'm saying, to be able to easily write some notes down, and equally easy to print. So all of these things to bear in mind. How long is it going to be? And I always say to my employees or anybody I deal with, always set, and again, in capitals, in your notes, always set your objective for anything that you do, any deck that you produce. What's your objective? Is your objective to get the deal? is your objective to provide something that can be passed around amongst a lot of people so that they can all consider what you're doing? I would say that's generally quite a good one. Is the objective to tease out a meeting and just to give it a certain amount of information? So you've got to really think about your objective. And oftentimes the research that you have done on the publisher or on the investor will help you set that objective. A lot of investors will say to you, I receive 15 decks a day. I just want 5 slides on this, this, and this. And that's great because they've told you what they want and you can work within their boundaries. Some investors will just say, just send us your deck. That's a time when you're thinking, okay, this is getting me through the door. This is getting me to the meeting. How am I going to catch their attention? And that is by doing the research. If you're getting stuck on anything, create your plan, set your objective, do your research. You'll find that the rest comes naturally. So your presentation checklist. These are a few things that you want to just make sure that you've got before you create your deck. Do you have your images? Now, we all know that working in this industry, images mean everything. Images of gameplay, images of your art, especially if you're creating something like a lovely narrative, storytelling. I've seen some amazing, beautiful art in some of those types of games. Make sure that you've got images and preferably video of the gameplay. Have you said, do you know what you want to say very quickly and simply? Do you have a clear idea? I call it ESP. A lot of people call these USPs, unique sales points. I don't think there's anything really unique about most games that I see. So engaging sales points, I always say, is what are the engaging sales points of my game? What are the things that really stand out? Have I got a link to the MVP in this presentation that I can put in to take that investor or that publisher to test flight? Am I sure of my objectives? Have I created a deck that is going to get me through the door or do a full presentation? And is my template clear, readable, and attractive? And these things you can think about before you start committing your presentation to paper, and then you can go back and check it afterwards. So let's get into the meat of the structure. And again, this will be stuff that you can take away. Your first slide, that's the slide that the first thing that's going to create an impression. And really, that should be the slide that you write last. I know it sounds a bit bonkers, but once you've gone through the whole of the presentation, come back to that first slide. And that first slide should be an executive summary of what you've presented in the whole presentation. And this is where you put your bullets in as well, of your key selling points behind the company, behind the game. And if you can, put some imagery or the link to the test flight up front. Because ultimately, the game is going to do half the selling itself as well. So, you might create this brilliant pitch deck. You've got to have a good game or a good concept as well. So be proud of it, bring it up front. Slide 2 should be all about the game. Jump straight into it. Don't hold back. No messing around. Describe it quickly, describe it simply. If you can't describe your game in like 3 sentences, you're a little bit kaput. You should be able to say the genre. You should be able to say why people will play it. You should be able to say how you're going to monetize this. And monetization is very important. And again, you don't have to be too complex about it. Is it going to be ad funded? Is it going to be a premium game? Work out where your monetization is going to come. Are you going to be doing in-app purchases? Where are you going to be doing in-app purchases? How are you going to be doing them? But keep this section simple. The game, the genre, why people play it, how you're going to make money from it. The third slide here would be your market. And this is really important. To understand the market for a publisher, and particularly for an investor, see, publishers know their own markets very well. And in your research that you've done, you will have worked out the publishers that are in the market that you're working towards. So look at the trends and the norms. I was presenting, I was doing a panel with a number of studios at Pocket Gamer Connect this week. And you would be so surprised at the amount of research the publishers and developers do themselves. They're constantly watching their markets. They're constantly looking out for the trends. They're watching the App Annie charts. They're watching getting Sensor Tower data. They're watching Facebook. You need to understand that marketplace. You need to know what gap you're coming into. What gap are you filling? Why did you and this comes back to your story. Why did you decide to do this? And also the challenges that you face in that market. Oh. Slide 4, the audience. The audience is different to the market because really here you're looking at the players and you're looking at you're really honing down on what audience you're going to be really appealing to. So if you're talking about match 3 games or social casino games, you're talking about women of my age, middle-aged women playing, a lot of games, and you've got to work out what's going to appeal to them, where they are, what geographies are they in. Will you have to do anything separately in each geography? What content they're consuming, where are they playing, how are they spending in games, what else are they playing? This is the sort of thing that you'd be thinking about anyway when you're developing your game, but so you're going to want to put this to your publisher and to your investor. And that is everything about the game, the market, the audience. That's your game part of the presentation. The second part of the presentation will be all about you and what you've done. And this can be in different levels of detail depending on who you're presenting to. But you really want to present on what you've done so far. Provide the prototype or the link to the game. I've said put it up front, but there's, you can put it here as well. The investor will want to see your milestones, your KPIs, your key performance indicators, what you set yourself as targets previously, what you've achieved so far if your game is already out there, any testing that you've done and the results of that testing, any community that you might have built up, and your marketing. I was speaking to a great small games company called Out of Tune Games. Out of Tune are based in Northern Ireland, and they got funding from Northern Ireland Screen. And Northern Ireland Screen is a funding vehicle which is funded by the Northern Irish government, but they are the people behind Game of Thrones, Line of Duty. If you're an English person, you've watched that English series, but Game of Thrones is a big worldwide hit. Also behind lots of things like Derry Girls, the Bollywood movies. Anyway, Northern Ireland Screen also invest in games, and they have set up this amazing hub. It's like an incubator building where they basically, with their investments, they allow people to come in for 18 months rent free and work out of this building once they've invested in their people. Now, interestingly, Out of Tune Games developed a whole game with monetization to show publishers that they get it, to show publishers that they can go from A to B, that they can do the whole thing. And now they're pitching other game ideas to other publishers. Now that's their chosen route. They got funding to be able to do that from a government organization. And this is another thing to bear in mind. It doesn't necessarily have to be a big investor or a publisher. This could be any sort of grant funding that you're applying for as well. But all those things will come out as the requirements will still be the same, whether you're going for government funding and grant funding, or whether you're going to an investor or a publisher. The other thing that's super, super important, and probably, I don't know whether it is more important to investors, I just think it's important, full stop. The team. What's your relevant experience? And okay, if you're a student and you've studied, say that. What are your skills? Could be great art, it could be great design, it could be the tech side of things. I mean, I do know that a lot of investors look very, very carefully at the teams that build up. And you really want to give a lot of detail about the people in your team. When you are going to investors and you're looking to hire, I think earlier on I explained to you that it's a bit like a marriage. It's kind of like saying to your partner, I know my faults and I know how to get over them. And that could still be a gap in your team. So this would be the place to go. We don't have a CTO right now, but we're hiring. We don't have a data scientist right now, but we're going to hire. Show that you're thinking in the long term about your team and your team makeup. And I think earlier on, I'd hope that you remember that I said they're looking for easy, profitable relationships. And those relationships mean that with your team. So you've got to make your team look attractive. They've got to look at this team and think, can I work with these people? So you've got to think about your team cohesion, because they're going to be thinking, they're going to be looking for gaps. So have these people just come together just recently? Quite a lot of investors, and Northern Ireland Screen did this from the example I was just giving, put teams together and they create a bigger team out of two small teams. And you might find that they will ask you if you're open to that. So this is a place for you really to showcase you, your skills, your team, and the people around you, and also what you want of a team. Slide 7 for data and traction is super, super, super important for investors. They want to see data, data, data. So if you have your analytics sorted out, everybody's going to be looking at retention metrics, day 1, day 7, etc., etc. So you're going to have to provide that if your game is out on the stores. They'll also want to know what your user acquisition plan has been, or if you've done any user acquisition, if you've invested any money in that, if you've tested any different types of campaigns to get the users on board, and were those campaigns successful. And if you want to find out more about all of these things like analytics and user acquisition campaigns, you'll find a ton of information out there on the internet. And also Patty and her team can also help with specific requests around these things. And I know that there's going to be other workshops around all of this as well. This is where you commit what you've done to paper or what you intend to do to paper. Then slide 8 and 9 is getting into the meat of it. This is really where we're talking about the ask. So you're going to talk about, in this slide 8, you're going to be talking about your figures, your forecasts. And this is where you're going to be using your milestones that you've already reached, and you basing your forecasts on the investment that you're asking for, what you're going to spend the money on. And you'll also talk about the risks here as well. And I'll say right out here, if you don't have those sort of figures, do not fear. You're relying on your story and your team and your game as well. This is an ideal. If you have some gaps here, acknowledge your gaps. But don't put your head in the sand and, hope that they don't notice it. Acknowledge your gaps when you're presenting. Don't necessarily say, I haven't got anything here, or I haven't got anything there. When you're doing your presentation, this is the time when you would talk about it. And if this is going to be a handout, maybe put some notes in your slide deck on your notes to presenters, and have it and have your deck as printed out as handouts. So you put notes in there saying, we haven't done any A/B testing on any user acquisition campaigns yet, because we are right now just an MVP. But you need to acknowledge what you haven't done yet, and you need to show that you know that these are things that they're going to be looking for and that you've thought about it. And again, when you're talking about building that marriage, when you're talking about building that relationship, honesty in this part plays a big part. Don't try and fudge things. Don't try and wing things. These guys have been around forever and a day. They've seen a million games. They've played a million games. They've launched a million games. If you try to BS them, you'll be out the door quicker than you can say, where's my presentation? Acknowledge your gaps. Be honest about your hopes and your dreams. Don't oversell. Don't undersell. Be as factual as you can and have the right attitude behind you. And then the ask is the final thing. Now, I've put the ask in here. I mean, obviously, when you're presenting to a publisher, you're wanting to do a deal with them to get published. That's a little bit more simple than going to a person and asking them for money. And so in the ask, you want to be as specific as you can be if you're asking for money. And you can then ask some questions here in this final slide, and you can ask people for feedback. If they have invited you in, if you've knocked on the door and said, I want you to publish me, or I want you to invest in me, and they've opened the door and said, come in, let's have a conversation, and you've presented your deck, that means that's the start of a relationship, and you are well within your rights to ask them for feedback on your presentation. And I would even put it in a slide. Is there anything that you can tell me about the presentation that you might want that I might have missed? And whenever I present to anybody, whenever I interview people, whenever I'm in a conversation with people, and I'll do it right now, is there anything that I should have told you? Is there anything that I should have asked you that is there anything that I have missed? Is a great question to ask in any circumstance, and certainly in this one. Oops, sorry. How do I get rid of that? There we go. Okay, so closing thoughts. And I've pretty much done my hour, so I'm quite pleased with this. My timing's gone well on this deck. I want a big round of applause. So my closing thoughts are: build confidence and excitement around your game. That's your pearl in your oyster shell. So when you're talking about your game, speak about it with confidence and passion and happiness. And also remember that your deck's going to be passed around, or it could be passed around. So whatever you put in this deck, you've got to be happy to share it, and you want to keep that impression lasting through it. Keep your attitude positive. Do your research. And remember the laws of attraction. And, it can be the smallest thing. The smallest thing can make a difference. It could be that when you're creating your deck, you've noticed on Tilting Point that they always use red and white. Use red and white. Pick up, empathize, make sure that you're thinking about what they want. Put yourself in their shoes and be attracting them. And it's those smaller things like doing your research, making sure you understand where they're coming from, and showing them empathy and asking lots of questions and showing interest. Makes them think, I think their game could do with a bit of help, but I really like them. I really, really like them. So I remember introducing, this is another closing thought. This young guy came up to me years ago, about, I would say 15 years ago, at a networking event. And he was straight out of university. And he said, I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to set up my own software company. And his name was Sten Saar. And I can't remember where he was from. I think it was Poland or Bulgaria. It was definitely Eastern Europe. And I said, okay, Sten, we can't talk much here. Come and see me. And he came and saw me, phoned me the next day, came and saw me the next, week, and asked me loads and loads and loads of questions about how he could be an entrepreneur. And I was super impressed by his tenacity, his perseverance, his total on track, his positive thinking, his direction, his focus. He was an impressive young man, but he had nothing. He didn't have a business degree. He'd had nothing really in his pack of things other than this big personality, his absolute commitment to what he wanted to do, and his genuine interest in being an entrepreneur. That young man I introduced to my business mentor, who phoned me up. And this guy, Hugh Chappell, he invests in Lad Bible, Trusted Reviews, Time Out. This man is a big investor. And he phoned me up as soon as he saw him. He said, thank you for sending me that young chap. He's going to go far and I'm going to invest in him. So bear that in mind, that it doesn't almost matter about what you've got. It does matter who you are, what your objectives are, having done your research, your persistence, your attitude, your tenacity. That will get you across the finishing line. And never give up. You can get 100 doors closed. Sten certainly did. You might ask me now what he's doing, and I've forgotten the name of his company, but he is listed. He's running a listed company now in insurance technology. He's super important, will not pick up the phone to somebody like me anymore. But he achieved his goals. And I genuinely believe anything is possible if you want it enough. So all of that, difficult to package it up, but all of that should come across in your deck. And I've hit my hour straight away. So
it was perfect. Like timing, it could be not better timed. So we have one question. I kind of answered writing, but I think I would like you used the term bootstrapped, and some of the people didn't know what it was. So I answered them that it's when you're developing without funding or investment. And it for the people that it's a very important term. Two things that investors and publishers will ask if you bootstrapped, and also if you're using sweat equity, if your game was developed with sweat equity, which also means the same thing. You develop the game with nothing but your sweat, tears, and blood while doing that.
Absolutely. And another phrase that you will hear from investors is skin in the game. And that means the same thing as well. Have you physically put yourself into this? Have you blood, sweat, and tears? You've done everything. You've literally eaten beans or potatoes for a month and nothing else. That's something that goes down very well.
Exactly.
Because they see your commitment.
Yeah, I have people, if you have questions, pop in the chat, just to keep it organized. But while you don't, I have a few questions for you, Jacki. And one that, like, you were talking about how publishers and investors sometimes investors look more on the teams, publishers more on the games, although they are both focused on the teams. But I noticed that a lot of publishers and investors nowadays are very focused on IPs, not only IPs that are already determined now, but games that can create longevity and can have like products in different media that they can make it bigger. So what I wanted to ask is, and I wrote it down and now I can, so how would you advise the team to do to make their IP stand out? So they have an idea of this game, they develop this little passion product of theirs. How can they develop that into an IP when they are presenting to a publisher or investor?
I think that's a great question, Patty. And there's two things I'll say to that. I went years ago to visit a guy called Angelo Bod. I went into his back bedroom in his house to see what he was creating. He's a great guy. He's still in the industry. And he thought really long and hard about his game. And I think to a certain extent, he got a little bit carried away with his IP, because when you're creating your game, you can have all sorts of imaginations about merchandise, or about this could turn into a film, or this could become a YouTube series, or that we could get another game that would follow on from this. And that's all great. And that should be part of your story, your origin story. But beyond that, you've got to start somewhere, and you've got to show some results in the now. So while you can talk about the future, a lot of hard-nosed investors and hard-nosed publishers will be just thinking, okay, but here and now, how am I going to make money? So they will look to the future, but don't be too worried if you don't have an idea about merchandising fluffy birds like Angry Birds and stuff like that. That's not gonna give you a negative point. It might give you a plus point in terms of the IPs and moving forward, and also it will give you a plus point in showing that you've thought about it. Do you think would you add anything to that, Patty, because you've seen a lot of this?
Yeah, I think you tackled it quite well. It's a balance. You have to show that the game will be successful right away, and that I wouldn't even go as far as discussing merchandise is not the point. But if you have strong characters that can maybe create spin-offs of the other, like you can create games with the same characters, or you can create identity with the characters, that's already a strong IP. You don't necessarily need to go all the way to have a film, but and also depends a lot on the genre as well. If you're doing hyper casual games, then you don't need as much as a strong IP as other genres. But yep, you got the point there. The other thing that was you were talking about create, like being a bigger persona and selling yourself, like, not, you didn't use the sell yourself, that's me, but the idea of really presenting yourself. And for Swedish people, that's actually a completely against characters. Like Swedish people are famous for the fact that it's a cultural thing that people don't praise themselves. They don't say how good they are. They always say, no, this is for other people to say. And that's a fine point. But when they are pitching and when they are creating a pitch deck, that can be a great barrier on. So what would be the tips that you would give for people that are very self-conscious about like selling themselves, and how they can go beyond that when creating the pitch deck?
Great question again. And I understand exactly what you mean, Patty, because my partner in business is Swedish. And we spend a lot of time talking about how the differences in doing business are in Sweden as they are in France, as they are in Germany, etc., etc. And this is where I come back to knowing the person or the people that you're presenting to. Now, you may well go to a fellow Swede and you understand that, bit of the conversation is like, hi, what do you do at the weekend? Getting to know each other, not being too in your face, a bit more gentle, speaking about, what you do and everything else, and then getting into the presentation, and then maybe having a lunch or a sauna or whatever. But understanding that that is how that person wants to do business with you. But that might not be the case for a French investor or a German investor, and they will be different to you. And that's why I always say to you, try to put yourself into their shoes and try to see what is going to be attractive about you to them. And you don't have to be the big I am waving a flag saying, hey, look at me, aren't I great? You don't have to be like that. You do have to create that level with that person, that relationship, because ultimately you're looking to get married to them. You're looking to have a contract with them. So you've got to be able to have that something with them. So, you know, a Swedish investor could be very different to a Spanish investor or a Latin American. All about the research, all about how they want to talk to you. And then it's really about just having that confidence, having that passion. And then the two of those things can go together, and you can be quietly confident. You don't have to be jumping up and down and waving flags.
Yes, good one. Sorry, because I sometimes Gustav is asking, how important is a vertical slide in a combination with a pitch deck?
How important is a what slide?
A vertical slide.
I don't understand what that means.
I think he means a vertical slice, so a demo.
Yeah, a vertical slice. Yeah. Thank you, good. Thank you, Karen.
I think it's very important, as long as it doesn't let you down. Put your game in, put your demo in if you can. I think that's so important. I have not yet to see publishers invest in a pure concept, although I have seen publishers take the MVP, create a playable, and put it out there for a test market. Again, Gustav, I come back to your research, and once you've researched, ask them what they're looking for.
Gustav, also wanted to, there is a reason why, for example, in the pitches that we're doing this month, I'm not asking for a vertical slice or a demo, because some people ask what is a vertical slice. It's a demo. I didn't ask for the demo of the game. I asked for a gameplay video because of that. A demo means you have to you have to be sure that they can play it, that it will work in their device, that they're not going to have a problem. If you send to a publisher or an investor a demo and they cannot play it, it might be the end of the conversation right there. He might never go back to you and ask, I can't play. For a lot of people, it's like, yeah, can't play, next one. And in a gameplay video, you can't fail. It's a YouTube video, like, post it as private and send it. So that's the problem. Jackie, you can disagree with me, but usually what I say is send the gameplay video first. If they really like your gameplay video, then you can come to a meeting with a device with the game installed that you already test, and you can give them the device and make sure that everything is going to work perfectly for them.
I mean, I've seen so many demos. I mean, when I've done big indie pitch with Sophia, you know, people come with different stages of demo. They come with either a video and they show you the video and they talk through that. And I don't know whether you call that, I mean, I haven't heard vertical slice myself, but that's something I'll go off and have a look now. But, you know, when I've seen different demos being pitched, I've seen so many varieties, you know, but you get the gameplay. As long as you get the gameplay and you understand what the objectives are and what you're trying to do at every level, then that's good.
Guys, are you satisfied with the question? With the answer, with the question? With the question, you're satisfied. Now, maybe not with the, no, but yeah. So Gustav is happy. Good. Yeah. I wanted, while you guys answer, we have time for a few questions more, just a few minutes more. So if you have ask now. Meanwhile, with that, you were talking about putting your heart in the game and how much they are looking for money all the time. So what would be your advice to balance this thing of money and heart, like not to become just a database pitch where say this is, or and how to not only be only passion project, and to find this balance?
I I'm probably going to reinforce all the things I've said before. I think if you have done your research and you know what they're looking for, then I wouldn't worry about being authentic, and I wouldn't worry about saying it as it is. I think the worst thing can be when people are dishonest, or they, you know, try to not be who they are or what they are. And you know, as I said to you before, this industry is so helpful, that you can try your ideas out. You can try your ideas out on me, try your ideas out on Patty. You know, test. I mean, we say that in the games world anyway. We say that with our advertising, we say that with our creatives. Test. And this can be the same thing, as long as you get into your mindset of test my approach, test my deck, then you know that's taking you halfway there. So that's the best way of achieving the balance. Practice makes perfect. And again, sometimes it doesn't. Sometimes you're going to do things that people don't like. People are people, you know, we're not all going to be perfect matches. But if you don't keep trying, you don't necessarily hit that sort of that gold vein. So it's keep on, don't be put off just by one experience. They could be completely different with somebody else.
And I will be cheeky with the last question because they didn't ask, but I will, which is many times when I was pitching my games and pitching my company, I got like exactly opposite feedback or exactly opposite opinion from different publishers. So one publisher would tell me, no, you should go multiplayer, and the other publisher would say you absolutely shouldn't go multiplayer. So it's like they would really go different directions.
So confusing.
Yeah. So what is your advice for people? What should they do when they get like really opposite directions? And again, it goes back to research and about the publishers, but when I researched the publishers, they gave me opposite feedback. What should I take into consideration next, in your opinion?
You've got to bring it back to what you can produce and where you feel comfortable. This is your company, this is your baby. And you can get a lot of people saying, oh no, you need to do all these different levels and you need to do it. And you're thinking, oh my God, I that's not what my vision was. That's not where my strengths are. And you know, you've got to play to your strengths and to your vision. You know, the interesting thing about this industry is that there's so much information there. There are so many opportunities there. You know, I do panels about the different types of monetization that you can put in games, and they're ridiculously varied and complex. And, you know, at the end of the day, the message I keep getting from everybody, from publishers, from investors, is bringing it back to the essence of simplicity. You've got to start somewhere. You know, the rest of it you can add on. But when you go in those initial days of early testing, when a publisher takes your concept or your MVP or your early game and throws it out into the market, they then hopefully come back to you and say, okay, this is our feedback based on proper testing. Some people will give you feedback based on their hunches or based on their own personal experience, but the rigor is in the market testing. So don't spend any money until you've tested honey.
Perfect. Thank you so much, Jacki. Guys, this is all the time we have. I know Jacki has to run as well. So Jacki, thank you so much for the workshop, for everything. It was really good. Guys, everything was recorded. We're gonna make it available on Monday for you to go, because there are so many details for you to look, so you will be able to rewatch and look at the slides again and check. Cannot thank you enough, and wish you all a really good weekend, and see you next week.
Thanks. Have a great weekend, everybody. Bye.
Thank you.
Bye, lovely.
Bye.
See
Bye,
you.
Jackie.